L 53 is a resolution recognizing the Syrian refugee crisis and affirming that Passaic County as a place where all are welcome.
County Council, at this moment, I'm going to request Freeholder Bartlett to please read the resolution so that it can go into record. And also, I would like to highlight this is something that's extremely dear and near to Freeholder Bartlett, who's extremely passionate about it, and we would like him
There's one other, after the field concludes, there's one other item I just want to bring to.
Sure, I believe it's an amendment.
Yes.
We'll discuss it.
Yes, really.
Thank you very much, Director. For you, everyone, we've all been watching the news, not only horrible stories out of France and Lebanon and elsewhere, but also the ongoing crisis of refugees flowing out of Syria. And unfortunately, in recent days, we've seen some political demagoguing of that issue that really, unfortunately, is deeply at odds with facts and how the refugee system in the United States works, as well as being, for me, a reminder of some of the United States' worst moments when we judge people's, whether because of their ethnic background or their religion or any other attribute, as representative of some particular political viewpoint that's not necessarily true. And with that in mind, I appreciate the support of my colleagues, and I'm happy to read this into the record. I'm particularly happy to be doing so with Mayor Mohammed Karula, who is himself someone of Syrian background from here in Passaic County, to be with us, Mr. Mayor. So this is a resolution recognizing the Syrian refugee crisis and affirming Passaic County as a place where all are welcome. Whereas the county of Passaic is proud to be one of the most ethnically and religiously diverse counties in the world, where 1 in 4 residents is an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. And whereas the county of Passaic has a rich history of opening its arms and homes to immigrants and to the vulnerable and disadvantaged, and those newcomers have consistently helped build a bright future in the county for their families and all of us. And whereas the conflict in Syria has created the single largest refugee crisis in almost a quarter of a century, with 7 million Syrians displaced by war and more than 4 million refugees fleeing to neighboring countries and beyond. And whereas refugees entering the United States are subject to the highest level of security check of any category of traveler to our country, resulting in a 14-step intake process that typically takes at least 2 years, including 3 fingerprint screenings, multiple interviews, health screening, and review by the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI's Terrorist Screening Center, the Departments of State, Defense, and Homeland Security. And I would point out that all of those checks are part of the existing procedure, not the proposed type of procedure that passed through the House of Representatives last week. But in fact, it is simply what we do now and the process through which all refugees currently go. And whereas the Constitution of the United States acknowledges the supremacy of federal government power in the field of foreign affairs, including power over immigration, naturalization, and deportation. And whereas the U.S. Refugee Act of 1980 declared it to be the historic policy of the United States to respond to the urgent needs of persons subject to persecution in their homelands, and gave the President the power to respond to an unforeseen emergency refugee situation, such as one involving grave humanitarian concerns. And whereas, although the United States admits only 70,000 refugees per year from a global population of more than 14 million refugees, President Barack Obama has committed to accepting 10,000 Syrian refugees in response to the shocking and tragic displacement of millions of Syrians. And whereas even this modest effort to relieve the suffering of many has been met with political opposition from elected officials and political candidates, including Governor Chris Christie, whose public remarks indicate a misunderstanding of the rigorous refugee screening process already in place and of the cohort of Syrian refugees being admitted to the United States, of whom half are children and only 2% are single men of combat age. And whereas by attempting to refuse Syrian refugees entrance to New Jersey and instructing state agencies not to assist the federal government in relocating Syrian refugees, Governor Christie proposes to violate the U.S. Constitution, which, as a governor and before that as a United States attorney, he swore to uphold. Now therefore be it resolved, in recognition of our common humanity and of the many communities of faith and common interest in Passaic County who would welcome and sponsor Syrian refugees if given the opportunity, Passaic County reaffirms that it is a place where all are welcome and where those fleeing persecution may find safe refuge. And be it further resolved that the County of Passaic urges its departments, local businesses, and charitable organizations to work with those organizations who provide shelter and sustenance to refugee families relocating to Passaic County and integrating into our community. And be it further resolved that the clerk of the board is hereby instructed to convey copies of this resolution to the offices of the President of the United States, the Governor of the State of New Jersey, the 14 members of New Jersey's congressional delegation, and the 20 other freeholder boards in the state of New Jersey.
Before moving on, I would like to provide the opportunity for any of my colleagues if they have any questions or comments regarding this resolution.
I just want to thank Freehold Department through you, Director, for putting together this well thought out, well worded resolution. It's sad that first of all, this is happening. We have this humanity toll and taking place in Europe. I want to applaud the European countries that have opened their arms and borders even to overwhelming numbers of refugees. And the tragedy of the events in Paris notwithstanding, it just shows you the difference between the leadership there in regards to the human fellows and the leadership here, or some of the leadership here, that tries to compound the misery being faced by these poor unfortunate individuals who are doing what any one of us would do in the same situation to try to save our own lives, save our families' lives, and put us in a situation where we can follow the pursuit of happiness that we so cherish in our own Constitution. So I want to thank you, Freeholder, for taking the lead on this.
Yeah, I also want to thank you. Paraphrasing, when for evil to succeed, good men can do nothing. And given the statements made over the past few days, it's deeply concerning today. Those who forget history are prone to relive it. And we need to speak out, and we need to be compassionate. We need to go back to American values. And the truth always travels a little more slowly than a lie, but eventually the truth catches up. I was pretty horrified at Trump's statements on Patterson and Jersey City and what the Republicans are saying. We lived through that. We live here. Nothing, and you know this, nothing happened in Patterson. Nothing happened in Jersey City. The Arab communities in Patterson were just as horrified as any other American community. So we need to speak out, and I think this says it very eloquently, John. You did a great job on this. We need to take a stand. It's our county, it's our state, it's our country, and this is the right move. It really is the right thing to do.
John, I just congratulate you and my colleagues for supporting on this. There's no dissension here whatsoever. We're on the same page, and you led the charge. So congratulations. Good for you.
John, I obviously, Freeholder, want to thank you as well for taking the lead on this. It was an extremely well-worded and well-thought-out resolution. I think what stood out most to me was the appeal to our common humanity. You can come at this from so many different perspectives, our faiths, cultural background, but the idea that when those who are in the greatest of need reach out to those who have the resources to provide, those resources may be held back for ulterior motives, politics, or agenda, not be acceptable to anyone. I know many of us were impacted with the images in September, a small 5-year-old child being found on the shores, lifeless. Those are the things that I think tug at our heartstrings. I remember when he called me, at the moment that he called me, I was actually preparing a message to discuss in my congregation what is the appropriate response to the refugee crisis. To which Freeholder Bartlett said, that's very interesting, because let me tell you what I have in mind. It's a resolution. It's one of those moments where you're really impacted, as I discussed with young men of different backgrounds. The idea, even in a faith-based institution like the church, the very stories that so many cling to of the individual who we celebrate on Christmas had to flee to Egypt as a refugee, as a baby, because he was going to be persecuted as a child. And he talked about how could those who have a faith based on an individual whose life began as a refugee. You read the scriptures if you're aware of it, and had to flee seeking safety. How could those same people who claim to that faith now turn their backs on others? But again, I go back to that phrase that you use, beyond our faith, our cultural background. It's the fact that we are all part of one race, the human race. That we can look at the needs around the world and put our political positions aside. That we don't have to create policy in response to fear or what we see on TV, but rather base it on what is right. And it is right that we would help those who are in need. And Phil, again, I can't say enough about how much I admire your motive and your initiative on this. Thank you so much for taking the lead. And then at this moment, we would like to maybe break protocol a bit and invite Mayor Karula of the Prospect Park to please say a few words. There we go.
All right, well, good evening and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And let me start by saying a simple thank you for doing what's right. Your stand, as symbolic as it might be, is the tool of combating radicalism, because you have millions of people who are in despair, who've been killed by their own president, their homes destroyed, and somewhere, somehow, somebody has to show them compassion. And by taking this symbolic stand, that hopefully will catch a momentum throughout the state and hopefully our nation. You're doing what I think is the most powerful thing to do, and you know, as mentioned, the governor obviously is misguided in his statement, in his desperate attempt to climb up in the polls, but we can't lose the basic principles that made America great, the principles that made my parents want to bring me here, the principles that made your ancestors want to come to the U.S. And if we don't uphold our principles, then we are taking a chance to bring our standing down in the world. So I thank you for doing what's right, and it's this simple action that might catch momentum. You will be a trailblazer for standing up for humanity. So thank you very much, and I pray for God to bless you and bless your families.